Thank you for joining us as we continue our conversation on who will be our next mayor. The conversation today is with Senator Jeff Yarbo, our state senator and the Tennessee state legislator. Let's remember that the future of Nashville is on the line here. So who represents us as our mayor is the person that is going to start moving us in a new direction. Join this conversation, and thank you for joining us. All right, Senator Yarbo, thank you so much for joining us here at the Urban League.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, well, this is a new territory for you because you are officially running across this city. You are a sitting state senator. And so tell us about the district that you represent in the state Senate, and then how that played a part of you wanting to become Nashville's next mayor.
Sure. So for most of the last 9 years, I've been representing a district that kind of sprawls all over the county and has included, at this point, between the two different ways the district's been drawn, I've probably represented 28 of the 35 Metro Council districts, or at least some portion of it, and have represented nearly 60% of the county over time, just in the different iterations of the district, and really have been doing the work of the city at the state level, right?
Yep.
So every issue that we're talking about that matters for the future of the city, usually those issues start at the state. So we're obviously talking about a lot about affordable housing. I've been working on making sure Nashville has the tools for affordable housing since 2015 and 2016. We talk a lot about transportation and traffic. The first meeting I had one-on-one with the last governor, Bill Haslam, was about how to get dedicated funding for transit. And just this past year, worked with Governor Lee and Butch Ely, his commissioner of transportation, on a new infrastructure investment. We talk about child care, passed legislation to make sure that that Metro's got the tools to make child care more affordable. And, part of it is that I've been working on these big priorities because that's what the people that I represent in Nashville need.
Right.
I know that's what they want. And we're not doing enough to actually make sure that affordability and those services and that infrastructure is actually getting to the people that I represent.
Right.
And the next mayor's got to start getting this right because we are growing so fast in this city. And everybody in this city needs to be part of that growth.
Right.
I told somebody last night it can feel like growth is happening to us instead of for us. And I think the next mayor's got to make sure that we are grabbing hold of the steering wheel and making sure that as the city grows, it's in a direction that's consistent with our values and in a way that benefits all of us.
So with that, because you are a sitting state senator, tell us, how does our relationship change with a Mayor Yarbo? Because you already have, you have a firsthand seat as to what has been happening to us. And you were on that Senate floor, thank you, yelling and fighting, for us.
Yeah.
But tell us, as Mayor Yarbo, what can you do to help us have a better relationship with the state?
Right. So as it comes to state, the relationship that the city and the next mayor build with the state is really important. You got to have a mayor who's going to stand up and fight for this city when its people, its interests, or our values are at stake. But you're also going to have somebody that knows how to work with the state, because half the issues that we have that we think of as local issues, you got to work with the state.
Exactly.
So a lot of the potholes feels like a local issue. A lot of those are actually on state roads.
Because half of our streets downtown are still owned by the state of Tennessee.
Still owned by the state. And so from housing to transportation to public education, the way that we work with the state is pretty integral to the work. And I think we've seen in the last year how bad it is when the city and the state are at odds with one another.
Right.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's
Most
not
definitely
in anybody's interest. I told somebody it's like getting in a fight with your husband and burning down the garage to get even. Like it might make you feel better for a little bit, but
Right.
at the end of the day, probably not in your best interest. And we got to start bring the adults back to the table here and try to get people to calm down and start respecting who we are and our
Right.
ability to govern ourselves,
Right.
but also try to figure out how we're going to get this city moving in a direction. Because when Nashville goes in the right direction, it actually ends up being great news for the state too.
And that's what I was just about to say. We are the economic engine for the state.
No question.
And I think that our friends in the state recognize that. And that's why a lot of the let's take control of this and let's take control of that has become, we are not it city.
Right.
Given that nickname, because it's not happening, it is because it really is happening, and the cash cow, and they are seeing the zeros from it.
Well, I think there's some truth to that, but I think lots of people can say that they want to make this relationship better, that they're going to stand up and fight, or that they're going to find ways to work with the state. Mm-hmm. But with me, voters have seen me do both those things. I mean, this year when the legislature was coming after TSU, when the legislature was coming after the Community Oversight
Right.
Board, when the legislature was coming after our city council, I was working within the community and strategically, strongly fighting back, showing up, speaking out, doing that work.
Right.
But also over the last 9 years, I have worked across the aisle and passed over 80 pieces of legislation. Almost all of which moved Nashville forward,
Right.
in progressive ways that I think we all know that we need. And so I have found ways when it's important to find common ground, bridge divisions, and build those coalitions that you need to do to succeed.
So tell me this, because tomorrow we know that the Community Oversight Board will become no more.
Right.
And right now, and we have no inkling, but I don't think that this administration or this Metro Legal will file any suit on behalf. What does a Yarbo administration do to restore and to get the community back, the Community Oversight Board?
Well, I think everybody needs to zoom out for a second when it comes to this.
And he is a lawyer, everyone, so let's get...
So the first thing is, Nashville should have never had to do this by a citizen referendum in the first place.
Okay.
This is a place where the mayor's office should have been working with the police chief to do community oversight decades ago.
Okay.
Without just letting it lie and waiting for the citizens to have to do it themselves.
Which, at 133,000 voters.
But given the fact that 133,000 voters, which is more than the next mayor's going to get, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that all those people showed up and voted, shows that the next mayor has to make this happen, has to restore a community oversight board that is going to have the ability to get real transparency, real oversight, real accountability.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that actually makes sense for the police officers too. You don't have a safe city if you're not building trust between your law enforcement and the community. That is pretty much it's a central part of what it takes to run a modern police force. And I think we got to see much stronger leadership out of the city on that front. Now, whether it's the legal thing, I do care a lot about making sure that when we file a lawsuit, we're going to win.
Right.
And the trick on the law of that is they did everybody's. They went after us and Memphis at the same time.
Right.
So we don't have as strong a case on the law, but that does not mean that you don't fight it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have been fighting it politically, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be fighting hard to restore it, to make sure that it's doing the job that 133 people in Nashville, and frankly, a lot more in Nashville, knows it has to do.
Right. So there you have it, Urban League. You see that Senator Yarbo will be very much behind the scenes and up front to make sure that Community Oversight Board lives in their day. And I think that people need to hear that because right now they're not seeing that. And I think the Community Oversight Board, from District 1 through 35, it was supported. And, did you vote for it?
Yeah.
Thank
Sign
you.
the petition.
Exactly. So,
To get it on the ballot.
as we stay in public safety, let's talk about, public safety. There's a lot going on there, and I think that, you used it too. 21st century public safety has a lot of layers to it. It has a community oversight board. For us here, we are participating in group violence intervention. So talk to me about what your vision is for public safety for here in Nashville.
Right. And we talked a little bit about the policing part. And I think that, look, we're going to have a police force. We need them to be well compensated, be able to afford to live in the city that they're serving and protecting.
Yep.
We need them to not be so understaffed that they're working overtime and spending all their life behind that badge.
Right.
Because we want them to be part of our community when they're not patrol. But I'd also think that we can let too often the entire conversation about public safety be about policing when we know that that's not what public safety is all about.
Correct.
Most people don't want crimes to happen on their street. It's more so than they want there to be a fast response to the crimes on their street.
Right.
And you can think there are a lot of things that cities can and should be doing to prevent crimes from happening on people's streets. And so, I mean, if you look at just the data, we know that crime follows neglect. We know that it follows failures to make investments. When you have neglected streets and alleys and sidewalks, when you have flawed street lighting, that's the kind of conditions
that opens the door
that lets crime thrive.
Right.
And we got to look at that and attack those places. They've done research in other cities that show that just improving the street light in certain places can reduce overnight crime by some 30%. And that is the kind of thing that you do have to think about when it comes to safety. I think second, you got to think, how much more are you putting like our mental health outreach teams, our violence interrupters on the street, making sure that when police are responding, they're responding to the things that they're trained and needed to respond to. But that when you've got other situations that don't need to escalate to that level, that we've got people who are properly trained to provide help sometimes, and to make sure they're less likely to lead to confrontations, that less likely to lead to incarceration. And I think that matters because, I mean, I've done a ride along with police and been with violence interrupters working in the streets of Nashville in the same weekend. And there's a difference in this sort of just the level of communication, the level of trust, and we have to be taking that community investment side seriously too.
So really, so the investment of both, still maintaining the police force, but also adding the violence interruption, mental health, talk about, because mental health is, again, it's not a 21st century issue, but it is 21st century digging, into public policy and how we engage better from the police side, but also just as a community, period.
So when you spend time doing public policy, you realize how mental health crosses everything.
Yes.
It's a housing issue. It's a healthcare issue. It's an education issue. It's a crime issue. And right now, the largest mental health care provider in the city is probably the Davidson County Jail.
Unfortunately.
Right? And that's the kind of thing that we can't tolerate. We're going to have to really invest in making sure we get the professionals and that people have access to the services they need to get the treatment that they need so that we're actually doing the right things there. The other thing that we got to do that speaks to both mental health and crime is we got to recognize that a lot of the times, when we see adults committing crimes, a lot of times they didn't start when they were adults. They got on the wrong track as juveniles.
Right.
If you go back even further, you see that they are just running away from home. If you go back even further, you see that those are a lot of times the same kids that we've been pushing through our foster care system without stability, that have been the victims of abuse and neglect. And so the better we work with Judge Sheila Calloway and the programs that she's working on so that we're getting those interventions earlier and earlier and trying to get trying to prevent trauma from building
Right.
up, trying to prevent those experiences from turning into just to anger and frustration
Right.
and ultimately destructive means.
So what are some of those programs that you would like to implement as mayor, particularly on that youth side?
I mean, that to me, so this is what makes me passionate to do this job. So I think the city needs a almost complete overhaul when it comes to early childhood overall.
Okay.
One of the things that's been a priority of mine at the state level, and I think that we need to be doing, thinking about it in the local level too, is just making sure that we're actually supporting new moms.
Okay.
Right? I mean, if you look at the evidence, like if we send somebody who's like familiar in the community but knows what they're working on to help a new mom, like we get some diapers, talk about like how do we talk to the child, like how, especially if you've got someone who's the victim of abuse themselves,
right?
Like how to think about discipline, how to think about
just basically the cultivation of being a new mom.
Right.
Well, I mean, not just moms, but, new parents, period.
Parents.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's scary to be, I've done this twice, and it's scary it's scary to all of us. And I think we all need help. And when people don't have those support systems, we need to make sure that we're providing them. And let me tell you, when you make that investment, it's one of these things that pays dividends all throughout life. It leads to fewer cases of neglect and abuse. It leads to fewer adoptions. It leads to fewer kids who are in exceptional ed programs. It leads to fewer, more graduations if you look long enough.
Right.
Because
you started off from the beginning.
Wait until we see them at 5, and you're really waiting a lot, probably too long, because 80% of the brain development happens in the first 3 years of life.
Right.
And so we got to do better child care. Because childcare in Nashville costs about as much as college does. It's insane.
Exactly.
and what that does is it means that families not only don't get childcare that's high quality, it means that to take care of their kids, a lot of times they just don't do the work themselves.
Right.
And it stops them from earning, it stops them from getting the education, it stops them from building wealth. And really, those end up mattering a lot for kids to have opportunities too.
Right.
And so, I know that I cheated on your answer get back to a source, but you should. A lot of times when we talk about policy issues, we talk in terms of how do we do miracles when I got a 17-year-old who's on his third arrest, or I got a 14-year-old is in 8th grade but reads at a 3rd grade level. We don't need better miracle workers. We need to design the system to need fewer miracles.
Right. And we know that, if we start early and, we can engage them, start from a mother, from the family, and continue to keep going on, that it does come out better for us. It means that, that she's working, that, the child's thriving, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, the process, and I think that's, why, I asked that question, because I knew you would, give a full answer. So it's okay. So with that, as we talk about, we move from mental health, we talk about education. You have a new commercial out, you and Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Kate.
and you talk about putting mental health counselors in every school. So I asked that question, but let me take it back a little bit. Let's talk about what happened, at Covenant, and and that spurs, because I know that possibly spurred this commercial, and to talk about mental health in the school, taking the counselors. So let's talk about Covenant first, because that connects a lot of dots. That brings us not only to you running for mayor, but also your position as a state senator. So talk about how Covenant and brought us to where we are today with that.
I mean, just mention it sort of makes you, I just don't know any parent who's not sort of profoundly affected. And I mean, it's just slightly different when it happens in your community.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of us know people who've been affected. And frankly, for me, it was one of the hardest days to go back into the legislature, because frankly, it's the third mass shooting in Nashville while I've represented this city. And I mean, while I am happy that more people are now paying attention to this, I also know moms that have been dealing with this for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like Miss Shondell, look, who, has lost her son in the Waffle House, and
Yes.
became an advocate,
Yep.
worked hard, and suffering a tragedy. And, I mean, the first time I truly kind of broke down that week is when I saw her during Covenant, because she had been up there trying to get people's attention from the jump, right?
Right.
And we are failing our children, and we are failing our mothers, and we should all be ashamed that regardless of how you lose your child, whether it's in, sort of a more garden variety criminal incident, or if it's in a school shooting, we should be embarrassed about where we live in the time and place that these moms have to. Part of their grieving process is trying to tell politicians to start doing their jobs. Yeah. It's unacceptable. And I think, look, I am doing and will keep doing everything I can do while I'm in the state to do that. But I think we know that the state legislature is not going to be our salvation when it comes to keeping guns off the street. Like, I am hopeful that we start seeing progress. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if we here in Nashville are waiting on Congress or the state legislature to save us, we're going to be waiting a long time. That does not mean that we don't need to be focused on how we keep our kids safe.
Exactly.
And so I think that means we got to use all the tools at our disposal. And I think that goes back to, when I'm talking about making sure that streets are safe, then we're doing better juvenile interventions. That's about trying to prevent that. I think that we are working with the police to make sure that people who are leaving their guns just like out open in their cars know that that's against the law. And stop doing it and providing free. And this is free guns for criminals. Crazy. But I also think that it means that we've got to think about, in particular in these school situations, a lot of the time, so 70 or 80% of those circumstances are students or former students. And I think the way that we're making sure we're surrounding our young people with the care and help that they need to deal with mental health, to deal with behavioral issues, to deal with those kinds of long-term issues. The faster we make those interventions, the safer we keep our kids in school, the safer we keep our community as a whole.
So your commercial's out, and you're talking about putting a mental health counselor in every school in Davidson County. Explain how we fund that, and what does that look like? Because that is a game changer for so many things. We have homeless kids, we have kids with like PTSD, other trauma. I mean, when I was in school, my parents were divorced, and I had in school counseling. And I don't think a lot of kids get that anymore. So talk about that.
Well, so, from a budgeting standpoint, I think we almost can't afford not to do it, because if we're not dealing with the fact that if we're not actually meeting families and children where they are with the challenges that they're bringing to school, then we're just basically letting all of the people that are supposed to be teaching our kids are dealing with that, right? Like, you got to provide the outside help so that teachers can focus on doing their job and teach, as opposed to be dealing with all the
social services,
all these other issues. And so, look, I'm not going to say that. I think partially that is how you work with programs like Community Achieves and Communities in Schools, programs that have been set up alongside our school systems to make sure that they've got the resources that are appropriate. I think it does mean that you're trying to provide adequate resources for the school to deal with this. And it probably means that you're trying to cross-train some of our individuals. Because our biggest challenge on doing this, look, it's not a short-term goal, because we don't have enough professionals to do that work in our state period and our city period. And so we've got to really start making investments there on a longer term to get that going,
to move into that direction.
That's right.
So, with it's so many things going on in schools. We're going from public safety to mental health. What other things, as a mayor, can you bring to the administration? Because one of the things that I pay attention to is that we're Nashvillians. We were born and raised here. And I also don't think that we do enough of, not really big things, but the things that are going to make us that stand out. Our community is growing. What can we do to attract more small businesses to start their businesses, to be homegrown? We saw what happened during COVID. And so what do we do from a small business and women-owned businesses from the mayor's office?
So I think that the way that we have done economic development has been way too narrowly focused on trying to go out and catch these big whales. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that you don't need your Amazons and your Oracles and those sort of big companies. Mm-hmm. Like, those people come and they provide a lot of jobs, and those are good jobs for people to have. But the real economic vitality of a city is measured by its small businesses.
Correct.
It's measured by the way that employees can become entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs can start small businesses.
Right.
Small businesses can grow and succeed, and some can actually find their pathway into becoming bigger businesses.
Exactly.
And so I would break out the economic development department so to make sure that it's not just like one guy, or two people. Because when it's one or two people, at the end of the day, you're going to be dealing with whatever the biggest game in town is, and not building those long-standing relationships and that ecosystem, sort of the coal environment that small businesses need to succeed. Because it's harder for small businesses to access loans, to access capital, to access workforce development resources. And, a lot of times people have a great idea for a product or a service, but don't necessarily know how to do back office, don't know how to do the compliance that's related. And so what some cities do is, how do you create the sort of revolving loan funds where, instead of making somebody who doesn't have assets,
right,
they can still get a loan to start getting into a place, start owning property, building wealth, building assets, and then they're repaying into that loan fund that's going to help the next small business.
Right.
It's that
using
kind
some
of
micro and macro loaning.
That's right.
So, as Nashvillians, Hubbard Hospital, which is now Metro General, and it is they need a new facility. So, what does the Yarbo administration do about Metro General?
So one, the city's got a legal charter obligation to provide indigent care, and we should live up to that. Two, we have a moral responsibility to General Hospital and the community where that is located, that we should continue meeting the health needs of the community, and I think that we have to do that. I have learned, not to speak too quickly on issues like this, because it is important that you listen a lot and make sure that we are taking all of the views, all of the considerations into concern, to make sure that when we are moving forward, that we're moving forward in a place where we've got the community behind us and we've got a pathway of success ahead of us. And so, I don't want to jump ahead by saying, this way, that way, when I don't
still
think
need to take the temperature.
I think we got to make sure that everything is actually that we've got the full scope of community stakeholders that are in play, and part of that decision need to be heard, need to be on the same page about how we're going to move forward and be walking forward together.
And I would say this, that I think, thank you for that, because I think that that's probably also been some of the fight. We know that, and firsthand, we have not expanded healthcare in the state, which I also think that plays into that, that I'm not going to call it a problem, but into the situation for that. But we look forward to, being able to work with you to understand what can be done to expand and to make a better Metro General Hospital, because everybody should have health care from A to
Right.
Z and from 0 to 100 and 2, 3, and 5. So since you have been out here on this campaign trail, and you have expanded, because like now you now focus on a district, and
I know, I love it.
And so what have you learned about Nashville that you did not know as a local Nashvilleian?
Well, I mean, look, everybody should run for mayor. I invite everyone at home to do this.
We don't need any more people in this race.
Not this year. But running for office is a really unique experience, because even if you live in a pretty big bubble, you do still live in a bubble, and getting outside of it and going and visiting communities that, across the county, one, will surprise you, and two, will make you more optimistic about the place we live. When I go out, I meet people. You watch politics at home. It's people sitting home watching TV, being on Facebook, yelling at each other about something that, like,
the 21st century foolishness of it all.
But when people are coming together, and that's whether it's sort of in the Cannon Arts District, or if it's down in Southeast, or if it's up around in Madison, or if it's in Hermitage, like people are in Bellevue, like people come together and they're building community. They're doing something creative. They're helping each other. And it will do nothing but make you feel more optimistic about the people that we live with and the future of the city that we want to be better.
So how do we retain Nashvilleians? We just completed a census. We still have not. I think that we have 1 million people here. It says that we had like a little over 700,000, but we have multiple colleges here. And how do we maintain them here to be, good citizens to Nashville? And how would you do that?
So the problem we got right now is there's definitely a lot of people that are here. There's definitely a lot of people that want to be here. Mm-hmm. We don't have enough places for them to live. Mm-hmm. And our current affordable housing strategy in the city appears to be keep on driving until you can afford something. And that's kind of unacceptable. It's pretty bad housing strategy, and it's even worse from a transportation strategy.
Exactly.
One of the reasons all these roads are clogged is not because people want to be in the car for 2 hours a day. They just can't afford not to be.
Right.
But it's taken time away from families. It's taken dollars out of pockets, and it's fracturing communities that matter. Mm-hmm. Because I think the way we've kind of come at affordable housing is not been thoughtful. One, we don't even know what we mean when we talk about housing. Like, there's quote unquote affordable housing, which is really, at a very narrow income bracket, but and we don't do that well.
Right.
You see that in the growing unhoused population. But it's not like we're doing well for people for rentals. It's not like we're doing well for starter homes, for grandparents that want to downsize but still want to stay close to family.
Yeah.
We don't have the housing that people can actually afford for any of those places, and it doesn't do us much good that somebody's going to build like 18, a couple hundred affordable units, 15, 10 miles across town. People want to stay in the neighborhood that they helped build.
Like
they
right
want
here
their
in North
children
Nashville
to be able to raise their children in the community that they've been part of.
Right.
And we haven't done a good enough job of preserving affordability where it is, that as these new investments are coming, making sure that we're trying to preserve the integrity and distinctiveness of communities as that's happening. And if we don't do a better job, we're going to continue to see displacement at a level that's just not, it's not true to the values that we say about ourselves. And we gotta start living up to those values.
So how do we do that? From an administrator, what does the mayor do?
Right.
What does Mayor Yarbo do to be more aggressive on affordable housing that is going to actually be affordable for working families in Nashville?
Well, I mean, look, so there's two things that I think everybody should keep in mind. One, that we don't have a magic wand, right? Like I wish we did, that'd be great. But you can't just tell people, and frankly, you wouldn't want to tell people who bought their home and have seen it and appreciate and value. You can't tell them that they have to sell it for less than it's worth, because that's not fair to them.
Right.
Right. But I also think we got to recognize that this is a much bigger challenge than just dealing with, a few hundred units here and there. We've got to think about making sure we're accommodating a much wider swath of the community. And so one of the reasons that you actually do want to see some of this downtown vertical development is you need some of those folks to move there so that you don't have such quick and rapid pressure for this kind of mid-rise development all over the city, so that we can be thoughtful about how that's happening. I mean, so we got to do a better job of using property tax freezes to protect our elderly citizens who are living on fixed incomes.
Which that's something that we help partner with the Titans and help promote around here. Yes.
I know.
Yes.
I mean, y'all were a big part of that. I've been working with Harold Love to try to let nonprofit organizations get property tax abatements if they charge sub-market rents. I think that's helpful. I think we should be doing partnerships with nonprofits, so when people want to stay in a home but can't walk up their stairs anymore, how are we helping them retrofit their house?
Yeah.
When they've got, the sort of the air conditioning's out, and they, or the weatherization problems that would help their energy bills go down. How do we rehab homes to keep them affordable while they're at it? We got to do a way better job of that. And then I think we got to, community by community, if not block by block, we got to think about how we are creating some affordable options for the community, because nobody can tell you that they're going to stop all displacement.
Right.
They just can't, because at the end of the day, if you own a piece of property that you're renting, it's your property.
Exactly.
And you've invested in it, and you deserve to make a return on your investment. And so I can't stop you from,
doing what I want to do,
doing what you're going to do. But I can think about the fact that that's going to happen, and make sure that we are building the housing supply in the neighborhood to actually, ensure that those residents can maintain a high quality life and in high quality housing that's in the community.
Right.
And that means that you got to use public land better. It means you got to use better financing tools and smarter planning.
So talk about a Yarbo administration, the diversity of it. What does that look like?
I think it'll look like the diversity of any organization that I am ever part of. I think if you look at my campaign right now, the three most senior people on my campaign, are all people of color. And it's not because we were targeting to do that. We hired talent and looked widely in the city and built, selected people with whom we had relationships. And I think that's what matters. It's
important for Nashvillians to look to their mayor or any elected official and see themselves, that they see the same, thing that's mirroring, because that means that there's someone sitting at the table that's able to address their issues. I know that as a Black woman, I can't speak for the same things that you walk through, and vice versa.
Same.
But if you have those like-minded individuals, and I ask that because we know that yesterday everything changed with the Supreme Court with affirmative action. Right. And that while that does not, and I think that will still have some impact in the workplace. From an urban league standpoint, we're always going to fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We would not be who we are today nationally and locally. And so, and I would like to know from you, how does the mayor's office fight to maintain that? Because we're going to see some changing. We saw that after George Floyd, that everyone wanted to put a DEI person in, and today in 2020, 2023, more than half of them are probably gone.
Right.
And what does that mean for your administration?
I mean, it's an important topic for today, right? I mean, there are people who are living in this city today for whom it was illegal for them to go to schools and universities, but the Supreme Court yesterday decided that there's not a compelling interest to actually think about how you're dealing with those issues, with sort of past wrongs or even maintaining diversity. That's crazy.
Exactly.
But we got to figure out how we're going to work with the law.
Right.
I mean, look, but I do think that there are lots of things that we can do as long as we are being thoughtful and intentional about how we're doing it. We can think about how we are designing our contracting process. We can be thoughtful about the way that we are creating mentorships, the way we're building leadership, the way we're investing in communities and places, right? I mean, we got to make sure that every place in our community has a plan that's just as sophisticated as whatever's going on downtown or on the East Bank, right? I mean, and there's no question that we hadn't done that as a city. It's frankly embarrassing that we have not more strategically over a longer time period thought about what to do on that stretch where you've got TSU, Fisk, Mary, all in a quadrant that is just designed to be an economic and intellectual and cultural hub, and it is, but
the visuals aren't
not
there.
Fully invested and incorporated that in a way that has worked. And I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to come in and micromanage that, but I do think you got to work within the community in a trust-based way to make sure that is something that is. I mean, that
as
should be
precious
the
as
cover of our brochure, right?
the precious as they are.
And I don't want to leave out ABC. But I do think that it's a good example of how we should really be thinking about how you're investing in the places of our community, and you can do that without you're not violating what the Supreme Court has sort of said. By doing that, we can still pay attention to individuals. We can still pay attention to injustice where we see it in our community. And if you don't see it, you're not looking, right?
Right.
I mean, I have some friends in the legislature, I don't want to talk about this type of issue. I'm like, all right, well, there's a reason these two streets that have the same name, they don't connect.
Right.
And you gotta,
because we're missing it,
right? And if you don't believe in structural, you can at least believe in infrastructure,
And when you talk about our infrastructure, one of our biggest things is our transportation,
right.
And how that is going. I mean, that's I think a great divide, and it's also a great connector for us.
Right.
Talk about your vision for transportation.
Well, the way you asked the question, I can't help but call out this fact because I think it's something that more Nashvilleians need to be really aware of. So, the African American community in Nashville largely developed around where Union troops were located in 1865. People freed themselves, found communities where they could obtain protection and protect themselves, and that is where Nashville's African American community first grew. And if you have any question about where those camps were and where those first communities were, you can just look at the map of redlining, and then you can look at where all of our interstates, run into each other.
Right.
Every interstate junction between 24, 65, and 40 just cars right through communities. And I think if you don't start with that knowledge and understand that maybe not everybody's going to hear your brand new shiny infrastructure revitalization plan and think that's going to be good for me. You got to really think long and hard about building trust and talking to people and making sure that everybody thinks that they're going to be part of whatever this plan is.
Exactly.
And so I think the biggest mistake we've made in prior transit efforts is that they kind of feels like there's a bunch of smart people up in a room figuring out what the transit plan is going to be, and then if we come out and put a big bow on it and send it forth, we got to do a lot better job of that's not a 3-month campaign to do transit. It's a 3-year campaign.
Or
Like,
more.
I mean, it's where people got to understand, like, okay, this is why this is going to get rail and this is going to get bus. This is why this is going to be this way and this isn't. And making sure that people understand what's in it for their communities, what the benefits are, what the costs are, and try to make sure that everybody is at least on the. You can't ever get everybody on the same page, but you can get everybody in the same chapter and at least knowing which way the book goes. And I think that's right now, this city desperately needs leadership to bring the community back together, help people find that common ground direction.
Because we do have a new Department of Transportation.
Right.
We have not always had that. And I think that, going into that, the minded, everybody in this drive, like you said, we're all in cars because that's the only way we know how to function, unless we live in certain communities. No one wants to get in a bus and then go all the way downtown and then have to go all the way back out. So it's a lot of, encompassing, like now we see, particularly in the African-American community, by TSU, a lot of bike lanes. I don't know who's riding bikes over there, and I have nothing against bicycles. You're just not gonna find me on one. I think I've aged out that category. But the fact of the matter is that things are coming in enforced out in communities. 12th South was a huge African-American community that all of a sudden looks like a whole totally different place for, and people were, as you talk about, they were forced out, but also too, they were priced out because of the fact that things started to build, and then, and here we are. Our home has changed, and we know that. But we also want to have a thriving community. As we sit in Metro Center in North Nashville, we also, there are still some things that's lacking here. More grocery stores, more economic development, coffee shops, as you go up Clarksville Highway still looks the same way it looked, 30 years ago when I left here to go to college. What can we do to help thrive, not just, certain sections of Nashville, but most especially in Black communities? Because every year we have an election, we ask the same question, and nothing has happened.
So, I mean, this is a gigantic thing, and so I think it is especially pronounced in the African American community, no question. But it's the same issue applies lots of places where people just don't feel like that City Hall's got their back, that they're paying any real attention to it, and so I think we have to be much more intentional and planning oriented about how are we building communities, because neighborhoods are communities, and you know what communities have? Someplace to buy food. What communities have? They have schools that people trust. Communities have parks. Communities have an ability to safely get to the parks. Right? Like my favorite question that somebody's asked, every time I meet somebody, I'll just say, like, what do you need the next mayor to do? My favorite response with somebody is, you just said, I just want to be able to go for a walk without having to drive somewhere first. And that speaks to me, because that is the reality that so many people are feeling. Like as this city has grown and the traffic has increased, we haven't been thoughtful about making sure that we're preserving communities. And I mean, if you don't think about it like that, if you get too caught up in just thinking about education policy and affordable housing policy and these economic development policies, you can lose the fact that really, people live in communities. What makes you love your life is the community where you live. And what makes you love your city is that you love the community that you're in, and you can connect to other communities within this city that you also like to visit or work or play in. Right? And I think if we think a lot more about how does, if you're living in Bordeaux, where's the center of gravity? Where are the places where people are gathering on weekends? Where do you go and not be, if you're a widower, like, where do you go and like find connection in your town?
The Northwest Y.
Right. I mean, but that was it. You know, I mean, I talked to people last week and talked about how much work has gone into making sure that Northwest Y was there,
Right.
and making sure that it played that role in the community. But we have to think about that, and how do people get there? And like, that's a place that you should think about what's the walkability to that?
There is none.
Right. But you can't do everything everywhere.
Right.
But I do think you can at least think through, like, how are we really trying to make this community, and not just make it work for making money in the next 5 years, but be building something that people can raise a family
For a lifetime.
Right. Like, I don't think people, a lot of people use this, like the Titans or the soccer stadium is like this thing. It is, like, we got to stop the growth and focus on us. I don't think people mind that stuff as much as they do. Like, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing in my community? Because I don't think people mind the growth as long as we are keeping this a great city for your kids to grow up. I don't think they mind the growth as long as you're making sure that it's a safe and affordable place for our seniors to grow old. But I do think if you're not taking care of those values, that people don't have much use for you. Right. Like, if you think the cranes in our skyline represent the highest aspirations for our city, like, you're wrong. Like, that's not what we're about. That's part of our cities, part of our growth, but it's not what we value the most. Like, we have to, it's value the people that make the city what it is.
So, last question. Tell me, what's your favorite restaurant in Nashville right now?
Ooh, man, that's how you get in trouble right there. Man, I'm trying to think what the last 3 places I've eaten are Elliston Place Soda Shop.
All right.
Which I love.
Yes.
Hattie B's Hot Chicken and Sweats. I've eaten at all 3 of those this week. And my favorite takeout that the Yarbo family does is Slim and Huskies right now.
All right.
Which, like, we are
Everything's
going broke
pizza.
because my son, who's now 14, like, my wife gave him the access to the delivery app on the phone, and so we are. It's going to be Husky and Husky because we're sending all the money there right now. So,
well, Senator, thank you for joining us. Now I want you to turn to the camera and ask Nashvillians, tell them why they should vote for you for mayor of Nashville.
I'll do it. Okay. Well, first, I want to thank you for inviting me to have this conversation and talk at length about this. It's too bad that we can't have more conversations, because I want to meet everybody individually, because I think people deserve to meet their mayor. And you can call my cell phone if you want to. It's 615-496-9851. But I don't use that as a gimmick. Most people already have it. So, but let me tell you, I want to ask for your vote in this race, and I want to ask for your help in getting elected, because I think this city deserves a mayor who's going to have people's backs, who's going to make Nashville work and work for all of us. I think that's sort of my test for how the city should move forward. Does this work? And some things just don't work. Like, traffic in this town right now just doesn't work. And there's some things that work but don't work for all of us. And I think that we've got to make sure that we are putting every community and every family on a track to where they can find success. And that's how I'm going to lead every day. And with me, you're not just going to hear somebody who's saying they're going to do it. You're going to be electing somebody who's been in there doing the work, who's got a track record of standing up for this city, standing up for our community, standing up for our values and our people, but also finding ways in tough political environments to still bring people together and get things done on housing, education, transportation, keeping people safe, making it a more livable, high-quality life community. And I think that's what we need. I think our city's got to get its swagger back. The thing that bothers me the most in this race is when I hear the doom and gloom and pessimism about our city, because I don't recognize that. That's not who we are at our core. And I think we are up to this challenge, but we do have to look those challenges in the face, take them head on, and bring the assets of our people, of our city together, which is the people of the city. Bring those people together to get that work done. And if we do that, the sky is the limit on national success. So I'm Jeff Yarbo, and I want to ask for your vote. I want to ask for your help. I want you to tell your friends, send a check, contribute online, contribute your yard. And also, even if I can't earn your vote, if I am lucky enough to be your mayor, I hope that you will help me in the work I want to do in the city, and always tell me what you think and what I should be doing better and what the city can be doing better. Thank you.